BYU basketball shows grit as they end a three-game losing streak to take down Oklahoma State 85-69. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte here. Big win for BYU. Got a little dicey in that second half. 20-point lead at halftime, trimmed down to 5, but BYU showed that grit that Kevin Young was looking for, and this team responded and got a much-needed victory.
27-point lead at one point, and then Dallin Hall emerged. This was clearly his best game of the season. Season-high 14 points for Dallin, back-to-back threes. And what really stood out to me, Mitch, was there were numerous plays that he made and others made where you saw the flex. You saw him celebrating with his teammates. This was the most emotive that we have seen Dallin Hall this year. It reminded me a lot of his performances last year, where he was super engaged emotionally. And maybe that's a big part of Dallin's game. He's got to be engaged in that way. We saw it in that second half. If that's the Dallin Hall moving forward, whether he starts or not, that is a big deal for BYU.
Kevin Young complimented how, I can't remember the word he said, but adaptable, flexible Dallin Hall has been. Whatever the lineup is, he's game for it. He checked in early. BYU started this game kind of slow. It's around the 17-minute mark in the first half. It was get Dallin, get Foose in the lineup. And those veterans kind of created the stability in one of the best halves of the season. And then some of the younger guys like Yegor Demon in the second half had a big performance. And Yegor, I love that he attacked the rim to get his offense going, his shot at least falling. He's been playing some good offensive games, as Kevin Young noted, in recent games in the Big 12, but his shot wasn't falling. He finally got that to fall, and that's promising as BYU goes into a stretch of games, back-to-back road games coming up.
What I loved about Yegor's game today is even in the first half where he was scoreless, still led the team in assists. I think he finished with, 8 assists, rebounded much better in this game than he did against TCU. He had a block shot right over here in this corner in front of the rock. It's okay if the shot's not going down, but you got to rebound. You got to still be engaged in other parts of the game, and he was today.
The physicality in the Big 12. I mean, you got to have physical guards that are willing to go down and get a tough board. And you're right. Yegor was willing to do that. He finished with 10, 8 assists, 5 rebounds on the night. BYU had 5 players in double figures. Trevin Nell led the way. Trevin ended up with 18 points. When he's got his shots falling, and this BYU team at large, 12 threes a night, they're tough to beat.
You need Trevin to do that because that's his specialty. When he is giving you double digits, it doesn't always have to be, 4 or 5 made threes, but if he can give you 3 and get to about 10 points, that's a good sign. I also thought Dawson Baker chipped in nicely off the bench. He's another guy who you got to shoot the 3 when you're in the game, and they got that from Nell and Baker.
Oklahoma State's kind of an interesting team. They've got 9 players on their roster, seniors or graduates, but they got some young pieces where I think with Steve Lutz, they're going to become a good team eventually. I think Lutz is winning. He said in the post game that, folks, I'm ready to get the hell out of Utah. It's been a long trip. They got a pair of back-to-back home games coming up. But Jamiron Keller, he's kind of like a BYU killer. Luckily, BYU does not go to Stillwater because that guy always fills it up against BYU. But this was a much-needed win, Matt, because BYU's got 2 road games coming up, Utah and Colorado. Winnable. BYU should be the favorite in both of those games, but road games in this league, they are so hard to come by, those victories. This was a much-needed victory at the right time for BYU. I thought you made a good point, and even Kevin Young pointed this out in the postgame. Getting that lead trimmed down the way it did, so they had to respond and show that grit, it might work out in the long run for this team.
It was a completely different team after that point because then Dallin Hall made some plays. Yegor made a 3. Just the energy, the engagement was at a much higher level, and they need to be tested in these ways. Look, it's easy to nitpick. They had a 3-game losing streak, and that's frustrating. I get it for Cougar fans. But you have to remember, they have not been in a lot of tight games. So for this to get tight and then to respond, that's not something they've done a lot this year, and that's a big growth component for this team going on the road.
Really got to give some shout-outs, too, to Mawut Mag. He was inserted in the starting lineup, second time this season. He started 6 different starting lineup for BYU this year. Mawut started against Florida A&M in relief of Richie Saunders. Tonight it was in relief of Cannon Catchings, who came off the bench for the first time this season. Mag is getting better every game, and I think that's a promising sign. He's a veteran. BYU needs that. Catchings, a little bit of a tough night. Foul trouble, got a flagrant foul call, which was kind of strange. Watching it in real time, it was what just happened here, but he ended up with 3 fouls, and then he had a shot in the corner right in front of the BYU bench that almost fell but hit off the iron. Catchings is going through it right now. They need him, and Kevin Young pointed out, Matt, that they ultimately want to get him at his best by March, so there's still time there with Catchings.
It wasn't the plan to play him 7 minutes. And I'm not an interpersonal communications guru by any stretch of the imagination, so take this with a grain of salt. But I didn't love the body language today from Cannon Catchings. That's something to monitor going forward. Can he remain engaged, and can he play his way back into more meaningful minutes? Because right now, of the guys who played double-digit minutes, who would you take off the floor? Because everyone, Foose, Kada, Richie, Trevin, Dawson, Dallin, Yegor, they were all impactful and they all played good basketball. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as the rotation shrunk today, that you had better performances from your role players. So Cannon's got to play his way back into it. Kevin Young said all the right things post-game, that he loves Cannon, he's a hard worker. Yeah. We want to get him playing his best basketball by March. Now we got to see how he battles to stay relevant on this team.
18 assists on 27 field goals. BYU's offense was moving quite nicely tonight. Felt like a better look of what this team is supposed to look like offensively, or at least what we envisioned with this team. Again, big win for BYU. They're all big in the Big 12. And but now it's going to go on the road, and you got to get it done against Utah, a rival. BYU hasn't won there since 2021. It's been a place, the Huntsman Center. It's been always difficult. Utah's got TCU coming up on Wednesday night. We'll talk about the game for 3 hours coming up on Saturday on Cougar Sports Saturday, noon to 3. Your early thoughts on BYU Utah at the Huntsman Center?
It's a great rivalry. I think BYU is a better basketball team, but I've thought that in the past up there, and they've lost. So the key to this game, in this particular game against Oklahoma State, they rebounded very well. BYU is a top 10 team in rebounding margin on the year. When they rebound like this, they're hard to beat. The reason Oklahoma State got back in this thing is because the turnovers were a problem again. They got to keep those low on the road if they're going to beat Utah.
Yeah, very interested to see what Utah does on Wednesday at TCU. Similar opponent to how BYU played in Fort Worth. Utah handled Oklahoma State maybe more convincingly than BYU did for 40 minutes. So we'll see how it goes. Saturday, 7 p.m. at the Huntsman Center. We'll get you covered at high noon with Cougar Sports Saturday coming up this weekend. So we'll talk to you next time on KSLSports.com.